So thank you, Kata, for agreeing to interview me. So do you want to just say what the interview is for so people know?
Yeah, absolutely. So before I moved to England, I studied cultural anthropology as a master's degree, and to finish that degree I need to write a thesis which has to be based on a research, and I would like to do my research based on shamanism.
That's good, that's fine.
Yeah, exactly. And,
so what is your first question you would like to ask?
Well, first of all, how did you become a shaman? How did you choose this path?
How did I become a shaman and how did I choose this path? What we say is we say that you don't choose shamanism, shamanism chooses you. And Stanislav Grof with Christina Grof wrote a book called Spiritual Emergencies, and they go into great detail with lots of examples of how that is the truth. So my journey began when I was a baby, but I didn't understand this, of course. So the first year of my life was unusual by today's standards. So my mother was living with my father in a caravan, and they were living in a field with plum trees. And my father was given a certain period of time to live. He didn't expect to survive because he had a serious illness called tuberculosis or TB. So when I was born, she was very concerned to look after him as well. And in those days, it was a very normal thing. They would put the baby in the pram outside for a long time. So all the things were done to look after me that were needed, like my nappy was changed, I was fed, all these things. But I spent a lot of time outside. And I didn't understand the significance of this until I went on to a private retreat for myself. And in that private retreat, which I had for 16 days on my own, I discovered many useful things. And one of the things I got to do is I got to rewrite the story of my life, like we discussed in the recent meetup. And when I began to rewrite that story, I realized that that year, mostly spent in the pram under the plum tree, was a huge gift. And that was how I connected the spirits of the plants, and especially the spirits of the plum tree. So in many ways I was educated as a baby by plants much more than I was by humans. So that's how my journey began in that sense. And I was practicing as what I would call an exoteric shaman for some years, up in the from really 1992 through to 2005. And I was doing fire shows, I was doing puberty ceremonies, burials, and marriages, and I very much enjoyed that, but that was all outside ceremonial things. Then in 2005 my wife died of cancer, and the night she died I got a phone call from my friend who said, "Hey, do you want to do this shamanic training?" So I said yeah, without any thinking at all. So that was a difference, because then I moved from the what I call the exoteric shamanism to actually being a shamanic practitioner, and that was a 2 years training in London. So then that was how I became a shaman formally. What I would say is that there are many experiences in my life which were all preparations for this journey, but I didn't understand most of them at the time.
But then it came together as a whole picture.
When I started that training, finally it came together as a whole picture. And at a certain point in my training I realized I was being given access to technologies that could have saved my wife's life had I known. But I didn't know, because I was ignorant, like we all begin.
But the plants were with you from the very beginning.
Yes.
You know that it's a really important part of your shamanism, dealing with plants. And
it is for me. Some shamans don't have such a strong attraction to plants, but others they really do. So it's played a very key role for me, my understanding of the plants. And on my retreat for the 16 days I had so much great communication with the plants then, for sure. Yes.
But also, as you mentioned now, that it's not, the plants are not as important for other shamans as they are for you. So plants are kind of just one of the toolbox of the shaman, aren't they?
So the shaman has many tools in the kit. That's absolutely right. So you find there's like a distinction between the shamans that like to work with plants and the ones that are not so keen. And it doesn't matter in terms of the work. And when I train people to be shamanic practitioners, I don't work with the plants in that way. We work primarily with the drum and with the breathing. And we do everything with those two modalities, drum and breath work. You can do so much.
And also you already explained to us on the meetups as well that the shamanic state of consciousness, or trance state, or how do you prefer to call it?
Okay, so you're asking me about the shamanic state of consciousness. Fair enough. So what I was taught straight away, day one, teacher doing the drumming, and he says, all we're doing is we're just inducing a light trance state. And this is a very key distinction. This is not a deep trance state, it's a light trance state. So what the drumming does is it activates what we call the theta brain rhythm. So when you're in a normal consciousness, that's beta. If you are driving a car for more than 2 hours, you automatically slip into alpha, which is a more relaxed state than beta. Beta is a normal state. Someone who's slightly neurotic, that's really beta. Alpha is much calmer. Theta takes you deeper still. So it's the ideal state to be able to access your active imagination, through which really pretty much everything is done. This is the huge power that all human beings have got, the power of their active imagination. Yes.
That's where the shaman wants to go.
So with the active imagination, you can then harness what we call your intent. So I see three things. First of all, the drumming or the breathing. The breathing also induces a light trance state, a different method. Then with that, you then declare your intention 3 times, out loud or quietly to yourself, and that is, you're very clear about what you are doing. So I must make this very clear. It's possible with these tools to journey anywhere in space-time, anytime you like. And I pretty much don't do that, because it's a very important thing for the shaman to be present in the here and now. I only ever get to do this if I have a client that's asking for some assistance, or if I'm having to do some work for myself, or the third thing is when I do the training. And when I do the training, I get to go on what we call the journey of lifetimes. I've only done this, I don't know, 6, 8, 9 times, I forget how many times, but when we do that, we leave behind this planet, this solar system and this galaxy, and that's really exciting.
That does sound exciting.
It's amazing.
I'm sorry if it's a silly question, but do you use these things together, for example, drumming and breathing?
It's not a silly question. I can use both together, but just to give you an idea, supposing I've got a journey to do, like I did a journey yesterday, for example, I didn't actually do any drumming, I didn't actually do any breathing, because all of these tools is they're tools to familiarize yourself with this state. So all I needed to do is I just sat outside, and I was just sitting outside my house, and it was like, right, now you're going to start this one now. So I have this relationship with my guides that they pretty much decide when I'm going to start a piece of work. Usually I will say to a client, right, I'll start work for you tomorrow, and then usually maybe the night before or some other time they will say, right, you're starting it now. And then I'm doing it until it's done. And then I'm writing the report up, then I'm emailing the report, and then it's really done.
Neil was saying something that he feels like shamans are more in between, so you guys are more like a mediator between the client or the individuals and the guides. What is your opinion about it? Have you ever felt that you would more do what the guides are saying?
Okay, so you're asking about whether I'm a mediator and what my role is between the clients and the guides. So this is a huge subject. So the first thing you need to be aware of is that there are a number of clients who have guides and they don't know it. So there are occasions when I become aware of their guides, working with my guides. There's a wonderful woman who is a shaman, and she goes to Breaking Convention, which is a conference for entheogenic plants in Greenwich University. Every 2 years they hold this in July, and she runs workshops there for anyone interested. And she says the whole thing about being a shaman is you just do as you're told, and that's pretty accurate. So it's like I do as I'm told, because the guys decide when I start doing the healing, really not me. And then I tune in. There is a part of me that is aware of the consensus reality. However, when I'm actually doing the journey, it's like that's gone, and I'm completely in the realms of doing the work. And really what it comes down to, and this has changed over the years, so when I began, I was doing a lot of the work myself, and what's happening with time is I do less and less of the work, and now it's got to the point that pretty much all the time My job is I am the witness. So I witness the presence of the client. The client arrives in the energy body. So this is different from many practitioners. I don't need the client to be in the same place as me. In fact, it's usually easy if they're not. If they're hundreds of thousands of miles away, that's a great advantage because I can just get on with the work without any distractions. So there I was yesterday, sitting down, and it's like, okay, right, that's it. And this is an interesting piece of work. I'll tell you about it. It wasn't for the client. It was actually a house cleansing. So the request was for a particular place to be cleansed. So this shows you that it goes beyond working with a client. So I was tuning in just because I intended to do so, and I could sense a number of small negative energies in this dwelling, and I saw the blue vortex activating above the building, and then the suction of the blue vortex caused any negative energies to be released from this place and to go up into the vortex. And I saw myself with the white sage smudging the whole dwelling, and then with the get those nuts up, the Palo Santo smudging the space. And then I was told, and I do say told, to bring in the peach pink healing light dimension. So the thing about shamans is you have access to many, many dimensions. So this is completely outside of this universe and any frame of reference that people would have to understand. So when I get that sense called in the peach pink healing light, it just rushes into space and it fills the entire space with this peach pink healing light energy, which feels fantastic. And the energy in the building just felt so light and so wonderful, and that was how I knew that that particular piece of work had been done. So,
but were you here or were you at that house?
That house is in Texas.
So you were there.
So I'm in Lancashire, the house is in Texas. Now, maybe that's a bit interesting to people. You see, I trained to practice face-to-face in the place. And after I've been doing my training for 2 years, a few months later I went to visit a fellow shaman who'd done the same training as me, and she said, why don't you do healing at distance? And I said, what do you mean? How can I do distance healing? She says, well, come on, you just do it. It's exactly what you already do, and I've got a client in Kansas. You can do healing for her if you like. So someone I never met in Kansas, who's a friend of my friend, says, do the work. So I went and did the work, and then I wrote up the report, I emailed it, and then you can imagine what it was like. It was my first distant client, so I'm thinking, well, I wonder what's happening. I wonder if anything's happening. And the days went by, and finally got the email through 3 or 4 days later. Thank you for that healing. It's fantastic. Great results. Feel so much better. So then I realized, and that's a microcosmic example of my entire training, because I began my training with a little bit of cynicism and a lot of skepticism. And during day one, when I'd done my first journey for my first person, and we just got into pairs, we did journeys for each other, and you do the journey, my teacher is doing the drumming for all of us, write it down, it's very important, you write it down. And then I gave it to her and she read it, and she said, oh my goodness, oh my, yeah, that's right. So I had my, so I had my doubts and my skepticism destroyed. And through my training, that's what happened. Any attempt to discredit what I was doing kept on being smashed because the results were so obvious.
That was during your training in London?
Yes, 2 years.
It's easy to be skeptic, isn't it?
What I find is the rational mind, which primarily inhabits the left hemisphere of the brain, this is its function. So skepticism is useful because you don't believe every hippy-dippy thing that we ever hear, and that's really right. So the thing about the shaman is the shaman has 1 foot in the physical realms, in the material reality, in a 3D world. This is why I don't go joyriding. I only do this work when there's a need to do it. And then I need to be there a lot of the time. So then the smallish amount of time I'm doing the work in the multidimensional reality, I'm well grounded. The kind of thing that's very useful to do if you're a shaman: wash the dishes, hoover the house, mop the floor, dig the garden. All these things are so important. In fact, they're essential. The other thing that's essential if you're a practicing shaman is you need to go outside into wild nature. Even if it's only to go outside and walk down the street and see a tree and just stop and be with that tree for 2 minutes. This is a necessity to have a connection with the nature, because this is really our source in the physical realms, is the lovely plants, who, you know, I love so much.